This week's journey begins here at Frankfurt Airport. I'm flying to Toronto today, which is exciting in itself, but the thing I'm most excited about has to be the aircraft. Since I was a child, I've been desperate to fly on board the Boeing 747, the Queen of the Skies, and today it's finally happening. So join me on this trip as I fly economy class with Lufthansa on the 747 to Toronto. Welcome to Edgington Airborne. Let's get going.
Today's video begins at Frankfurt's Terminal 1, the older of two terminals here at Frankfurt and home to Lufthansa. As I'd just flown in with the German airline from Birmingham, I was connecting, so I only managed to experience the departures area of Concourse B where my 747 would be waiting. Now Concourse B is certainly not going to win many design awards, but there was a small selection of shops to explore. For me though, the best feature is found upstairs on level 3, where you can enjoy a meal while enjoying great views of the aircraft. For an aviation enthusiast like me, this is heaven.
Now personally, Frankfurt's not my favourite airport in the world and certainly not my favourite to connect through, but it's not bad by any means. There's still a little selection of shops and restaurants available here at the B gates, which is where today's flight departs from, and it's time to get on board the 747. Let's go.
Well, needless to say, my first ever takeoff on board a Boeing 747 was pretty special, and I was grinning throughout. It's just a shame that the weather wasn't playing ball. This aircraft was a massive leap forward for commercial aviation, and since its first flight in 1969, around 3.5 billion people have flown on this beautiful machine. This particular version, the 747-400, is one of 13 operated by Lufthansa, who also fly the newer 747-8. Sadly, after decades of service, the 747's days are numbered as newer, more efficient jets take over. But while the Queen of the Skies is still flying, let's see what it's like on board. Service began around 30 minutes into the flight, and the very friendly Lufthansa crew kicked things off with a round of drinks accompanied by a small snack. Now I'm not a big drinker, so I just went with a soft drink, and once the empties had been cleared a few minutes later, hot towels were provided. This added a kind of premium feel, even way down the back here in economy. Following the first round of drinks, there was little time to take a look at the 747 cabin, and on this particular aircraft there were 371 seats in total, the majority of course in economy. The 747 benefits from high ceilings which add to a feeling of space even at the back of the plane. Lufthansa do provide reading lights in the overhead panel, although for me the lack of individual air vents is disappointing, especially on a long flight. A nice modern addition is the availability of at-seat charging, and although not as large as on some newer aircraft, there was still ample storage in the overhead lockers. It was very easy to see the age of this aircraft throughout, and this was most noticeable in the toilets. You won't find any motion operated taps in here. Now, despite this aircraft being 20 years old, in my book it should still be kept clean, and while the aircraft wasn't terrible by any means, I was a little let down by some of the stains and dirt that I found at my seat, particularly as this aircraft had been on the ground for 8 hours in Frankfurt before my flight. But maybe I'm being too picky. A little bit of dirt certainly wasn't going to put me off having my in-flight meal though. All passengers in economy are of course provided food on board, but you can choose to pre-order a premium a la carte meal before departure with a range of options available online. Which is exactly what I did, and an additional benefit is that I received my food before the other passengers so that I can enjoy their reaction when it arrived. Now I won't mince my words here, this meal was exceptional, and for a moment I had to remind myself that I wasn't in business class. I ordered the classic option, which includes an orange and fennel salad, beef fillet with peppercorn jus and pomana, and for dessert a delicious Bavarian cream with raspberry sauce. My meal also came with real glassware as well as metal cutlery and was rounded off with a couple of delicious chocolates. I can honestly say that this was the best meal that I have had on board an aircraft in a very, very long time.
So, it's that part of the video. We're about halfway through the flight. Let's take a look at the seat you could expect to experience in economy class on the Lufthansa 747-400.
The Boeing 747 is famous for its hump at the front of the aircraft, offering a smaller, more private cabin upstairs. This space is used for business class on Lufthansa's aircraft, as is the area at the front of the jet on the lower deck. Further back is where you can find both premium economy and standard economy class seats. And the economy class seats are by and large the same throughout, unless you're seated in an exit row. At the top of the seat you'll find a feature that I'm always excited to see, which is a coat hook. We'll look at the entertainment system soon, but it is worth noting that USB power is available on the right of the screen, as is the headphone input to enjoy the programming. You can also adjust the angle of the screen, which is very helpful if the passenger in front of you reclines. Beneath this is your literature pocket containing Lufthansa's in-flight magazines, and much like on the airline's narrow-body aircraft in Europe, this area is not suitable for personal storage due to the exposed section at the bottom. Your tray table can be used in a couple of ways, such as folded in half if you don't need too much space, or for the meal service it can be opened up fully, providing plenty of room. It also offers some adjustment and a space to hold your drink securely. One feature that I did like was a drinks holder, which can be used when the table is stowed, leaving you with plenty of room. There isn't a huge amount of storage at this seat, but a netted section can be used for smaller items in flight. But most importantly on a long-haul flight is the legroom, and while not the most generous in the sky, there is a decent amount of space if, like me, you're around 6 foot tall. To improve the comfort on board, Lufthansa do fit their economy class seats with adjustable headrests, which is a very welcome feature, and if you really want to relax, you can use a blanket and pillow, which were provided on my seat when I boarded. If you tried the economy class seat with Lufthansa, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments section, or perhaps you've experienced premium economy, which offers additional space and to me, did look very comfortable. As wonderful as the view was out of the window, you will need more to entertain you on a long flight, and as we saw earlier, Lufthansa provides seatback entertainment on board the 747 to help pass the time. The system is easy to use with a clear touchscreen which was very responsive, and although I was happy that the brilliant Guardians of the Galaxy was available, overall I think it's fair to say that the selection of movies on offer isn't as extensive as you might find on other carriers. If none of the films grab your attention, there is a range of shorter shows available, and I was pleased that children are catered for with their own entertainment selection. Of course, much of my flight was spent enjoying the in-flight map and tracking my progress towards Toronto. You can also communicate with friends and family on the ground during flight by purchasing one of Lufthansa's Wi-Fi packages, which range from €7 for simple messaging to €29, enabling you to browse the internet and post images to social media. Speaking of which, I do post updates of all of my travels as they happen, as well as channel news on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, so if you aren't already, why not consider following me? A few hours had passed since the main meal service, and although the superb Lufthansa crew had kept passengers hydrated with drinks runs and self-service drinks in the galleys, I was starting to get a little peckish towards the end of the flight. Thankfully for me, with just over an hour before landing, it was snack time. The cabin crew handed out boxes containing a vegetable calzone. No, it wasn't quite up to the standards of my earlier steak, but it did taste much better than I expected, and I do love pizza.
seatbelt sign's been switched on, we're approaching Toronto. Make sure to stick around to the very end of the video where I'll share with you the pros and cons of today's flight. But for now, enjoy the landing. And that's it. Welcome to Toronto after that flight with Lufthansa on the Boeing 747. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, now I'll share with you my highs and lows from today's trip. Kicking things off in Frankfurt. And Frankfurt is one of those airports that if I have to travel through it, that's not a problem, but it's certainly not my favourite in Europe. And in particular today, the boarding process, for me, it was a bit of a scrum really. Just large crowds, no segregation, no group boarding. It was a bit of a free-for-all and it wasn't particularly well managed. That was a bit of a disappointment. But then we come to the reason I took this particular flight, and that was to experience an aircraft for me that I've been wanting to try for many, many years since I was a child, the Boeing 747. And sadly, it's kind of like meeting one of your heroes. I was left a little bit disappointed. Now, the aircraft itself, obviously, over the decades has proven itself to be a fantastic machine, but it is an older design, and that was very apparent, particularly when you say that my last long-haul flight was on the Airbus A380, a much newer aircraft, a newer generation. And this Boeing 747, it certainly looked like it was ready for retirement really. That's just my opinion, but things like the fact that the cabin design overall, it was old frankly. I said retro on Instagram, but it was just a much older design. And it was nice in places, but you could see bits of wear and tear, and sadly some dirt around the cabin as well. There were a couple of highlights though to the cabin, and one of those was the in-flight entertainment system itself. I found it to be quite responsive, although on the flip side, I wasn't overly impressed with the selection available. I thought there would have been more choice really. The seat itself, well, again, I found that a little bit disappointing. It was quite narrow, particularly around the shoulders for me. The legroom was adequate, nothing impressive particularly, but the one thing that really did stick with me is the fact that the seat pan itself was really firm. It's quite uncomfortable. I had to get up a lot more than the passenger seated just across from me wanted me to, really. One thing that was fantastic on this flight, though, and that has to be the cabin crew. They were ever present in the cabin, up and down, constantly offering glasses of water or juice to passengers, and the service, it went flawlessly. It was really impressive. And speaking of the service, I did book that a la carte meal today. It was chargeable, but frankly I'm glad I did. It was fantastic and I highly recommend trying it yourself in future. So overall, would I recommend Lufthansa? Well, yes, I definitely would, particularly in Europe that I'm used to. They're a very good airline, and there was nothing wrong with the flight today overall. But the 747, the one I've been looking to try for such a long time, sadly for me, it's no longer going to be anywhere near the top of my list. If I can, I'll certainly try with Lufthansa, for example, the Airbus A350, much more modern jet. And there's many other airlines that operate the likes of the Boeing 787 and the A380, such as Lufthansa do themselves. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I don't want to be too negative about the 747. It is still Queen of the Skies and it's got a massive page in aviation history. But let me know your experiences of this aircraft. And if you agree or disagree with anything I've said, do feed me that back in the comment section below. Of course, if you want to see more flight reviews from me on this channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future episode. And as always, take care.